The store's shelves began shaking violently, as if something massive was moving beneath the floor. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Not the shaking itself, but the way the store's usual noises went out of rhythm. The freezers along the back wall still hummed, but their low drone wavered, dipping in pitch like a tired breath. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered in uneven intervals, casting the aisles into alternating bands of harsh white and sickly shadow. I had been standing behind the counter, half listening to a late-night talk show murmuring from the small radio by the register, when the floor trembled beneath my shoes. At first, it felt like a passing truck. This place sat off a nearly empty highway, and sometimes the semis rattled the windows when they roared past after midnight. I waited for the vibration to fade. Didn't. Instead, the shelves to my left, the aisle with canned soups and boxed pasta, began to quiver. Metal rattled softly, a nervous clicking as cans knocked together. The sound spread down the aisle like a shiver. I stepped out from behind the counter, my reflection sliding along the glass of the cooler doors as I moved. The store was narrow, long aisles stretching toward the back, each one a corridor of cluttered color. Chips, candy, bottled drinks, cleaning supplies. The floor was cheap tile, scuffed and dulled by years of foot traffic. Now it felt alive. Not warm, not cold, just active, pulsing faintly under my soles. The shaking intensified in short bursts, like something testing its strength. A row of instant noodle cups toppled in a neat, deliberate line, one after another, as if guided by an invisible hand. They didn't scatter randomly. They fell in sequence, starting at the far end of the aisle and moving toward me. I found myself backing up without realizing it, my heel bumping the base of the counter. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding wrong in the space, stretched thin by the humming machines and the high ceiling. There was no answer, just the radio crackling softly and the lights flickering faster now. 3 quick blinks, a pause, then 2 more. The pattern repeated, precise enough that it made my stomach tighten. The floor vibrated again, stronger this time. Dust drifted down from the ceiling tiles. In the freezer doors, my reflection wavered, bending slightly, as if the glass itself were flexing. I pressed my palm to one of the doors and felt it buzzing faintly, like a trapped insect beating its wings. Something moved beneath the store. Not ran, not slithered. It shifted, slow and immense, as though a massive body were turning in its sleep. The sensation traveled through the tiles and into my bones. My teeth clicked together before I could stop them. I thought of the old stories I'd heard when I first took this job, half jokes from the previous owner about how the building used to be something else. A depot, maybe, or a storage site. He'd laughed when he said it, waved a hand like it didn't matter. This whole town's built on forgotten things, he'd told me. I'd laughed too. Another tremor rolled through the store, this one traveling from the back wall toward the front windows. Bottles clinked together. A bag of chips puffed and burst, spilling its contents onto the floor in a perfect circle. The lights flickered again, the pattern changing, longer pauses now, as if counting. I realized, then, that the vibrations weren't random. They were mapping the space. Each aisle shook in turn, left to right, front to back. When the tremor reached the register, the drawer slid open with a sharp clang, coins jumping in their tray. The radio cut out completely, leaving behind a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. The floor pulsed. I staggered, grabbing the counter to steady myself. Beneath my hand, the laminate surface rippled ever so slightly, like skin reacting to pressure. A deep sound rose up through the store. Not a roar, not a growl, but a resonant hum that vibrated in my chest more than my ears. Felt ancient, patient, aware. The freezers along the back wall began to frost over, ice spiderwebbing across the glass in branching patterns that mirrored the cracks forming in the tile floor. The lights dimmed until the store was bathed in a dull, underwater glow. Shadows stretched where they shouldn't, bending around corners, pooling at the ends of aisles. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. I had the overwhelming sense that movement would be noticed, that whatever lay beneath the store was listening through the floor, feeling every shift of weight. The tiles beneath my feet bulged slightly, then settled, like a breath exhaled. A memory surfaced unbidden. A line from a local history pamphlet I'd skimmed once during a slow shift. Something about the land being sealed after an incident no one liked to name. About vibrations reported for years afterward, always dismissed as trucks or earthquakes too small to measure. The shaking stopped. For a moment, the silence was complete. No hum, no flicker. Even my breathing sounded too loud. Then, from directly beneath the center aisle, came a slow, deliberate knock. 1, 2, 3. Each impact sent a small ripple through the floor, perfectly spaced, impossibly controlled. The lights flickered one last time, all of them at once, plunging the store into darkness. In the black, I felt the floor swell upward, just a fraction, as if something enormous were pressing closer, curious, awake. When the emergency lights finally sputtered on, the shelves were still, the products frozen mid-fall, hovering for a heartbeat before clattering down all at once. The radio crackled back to life, the host laughing at something I couldn't hear. I stood there, shaking, knowing with a certainty that chilled me deeper than fear. Whatever slept beneath the store had not been disturbed by accident. It had been called. And now that it was awake, the floor between us felt very thin. A customer whispered, "You shouldn't have stayed past midnight," before vanishing into thin air. The clock above the register had just clicked over to 12:07 when I realized how quiet the store had become. Not silent, never silent, but emptied of its usual rhythms. The soda coolers along the back wall still hummed, but the sound felt flatter, stretched thin, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered in a slow, uneven pattern that didn't quite repeat, leaving faint afterimages in my vision. Even the air felt stale, heavy with the smell of old coffee and disinfectant. I was alone, or so I thought. The convenience store was laid out like a long, narrow box, 2 aisles running parallel from the front windows to the back freezers, with the counter wedged between lottery posters and cigarette displays. The glass doors at the entrance reflected the inside of the store more clearly than the dark parking lot beyond, making it feel as though I were sealed inside a brighter, smaller version of reality. I'd stayed late because the relief shift hadn't shown. Midnight came and went without ceremony. No chime, no change in the world beyond the clock's quiet movement. I told myself it was just another overnight, another stretch of hours to be filled with restocking shelves and listening to the radio whisper static between stations. That was when I noticed him. He stood halfway down the first aisle, near the shelves of canned vegetables. I hadn't heard the door open. No bell had rung. He was simply there, tall and still, his outline softened by the flickering light above him. He wore a dark jacket that absorbed the shadows, and his face was turned just enough that I couldn't quite see it. "Hey," I said, my voice echoing more than it should have. "I'll be with you in a second." He didn't respond. Instead, he reached out and brushed his fingers along the shelf, setting the cans into a soft, metallic rattle. The sound carried down the aisle, bouncing off the freezer doors and returning slightly out of sync, as if the store were replaying it back to me. I watched him in the reflection of the cooler glass as I stepped from behind the counter. My reflection lagged behind my movements by half a second, just enough to make my stomach twist. When I stopped, it took an extra moment to catch up. "Store closes at 1, I said, more out of habit than necessity. "Just so you know." He finally turned his head. His face was pale, indistinct, like it couldn't quite settle into focus. His eyes, when they met mine, reflected the light too brightly, as though they were mirrors instead of glass. "You shouldn't have stayed past midnight," he whispered. The words were quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of the freezers, but they landed with weight. They didn't sound like a warning so much as a statement of fact, something already decided. I opened my mouth to respond, but the lights flickered sharply. 3 quick blinks, then darkness for just a fraction of a second. When the light returned, the aisle was empty. He hadn't walked away. There was no retreating footstep, no rustle of clothing. The space where he'd stood was simply vacant, the cans still gently rocking on their shelves. My pulse hammered in my ears. I scanned the store, checking the second aisle, the bathrooms in the back, even the storage room door. Nothing. The front door was still locked, the chain secure. I laughed. A thin, brittle sound. "Get it together," I muttered. "Long shifts did things to your head. Fatigue. Imagination." That's what I told myself as I returned to the counter. But the store felt different now. The lights continued their strange flicker, repeating the same uneven pattern I'd noticed earlier. Shadows stretched along the floor, pooling beneath the shelves in places where the light shouldn't allow them. The clock above the register still read 12:07. Minutes passed. Or maybe they didn't. The radio murmured softly, cycling through static and fragments of voices that never quite resolved into words. I glanced at the clock again. 12:07. A cold prickle crept up my spine. I checked my phone. The screen lit up, then dimmed, then lit again. No signal. No time displayed. Just a blank glow reflected faintly in the counter's scratched surface. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the glass of the freezer doors. A figure standing behind me. I turned slowly. The customer was back, closer now, standing at the end of the aisle nearest the counter. His reflection appeared in the glass before I could see him directly, distorted and elongated, his mouth moving out of sync with the rest of him. "You hear it now, don't you?" he said softly. "Hear what?" I asked, my voice barely steady. The hum of the freezers deepened, dropping into a low, pulsing rhythm. It matched something else. A subtle vibration underfoot, like a second heartbeat embedded in the floor. The lights flickered in time with it, brightening and dimming in a slow, deliberate cadence. "The store," he said. "It doesn't like being watched after midnight." He stepped backward, his outline thinning, the shadows around him stretching upward as though pulled by invisible hands. The shelves nearest him trembled, products sliding forward but never falling. "Wait," I said. "What happens at?" He vanished mid-step, dissolving into a smear of darkness that folded in on itself and was gone. The hum stopped. The lights steadied. The vibration faded. The clock still read 12:07. I stood alone behind the counter, the store once again quiet in its familiar, unsettling way. But now I could feel it. An awareness threaded through the walls, the shelves, the floor beneath my feet. The reflections in the glass watched me even when I looked away. I didn't know how long I stood there. I only knew that the clock never moved, and the door wouldn't unlock. And somewhere beneath the hum of the machines, something waited for midnight to end.